This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care of yourself.
And welcome to Fruitloops. Buiti binafi and bienvenidos, bitches. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.
Fruitloops is a podcast about true crimes committed by people of color and those who are othered and the victims, because there are, believe it or not, systems, institutions, and patterns in society that gatekeep this information. But we're going to give it to you straight, no chaser. The truth is, we're all capable of doing very shitty stuff.
Yep.
And all victims deserve to have their stories told. These crimes rarely get any public attention because, in the simplest of terms, the news is racist. Allegedly.
And we are Wendy and Beth. She's Wendy, a Black Latinx woman, and I'm Beth, and I just happen to be white.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's just a little piece of who we are.
Oh, yes.
But who we are not is journalists, investigators, or psychologists. We're just a couple of gals interested in true crime. Also, the opinions expressed in this podcast are just that, our opinions.
So, who are we talking about today, Fred?
Well, today is our episode 244. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like that deserves one of these.
Yeah.
Hey, pat yourself on the back over there, friend. And
Yeah,
Fruities,
you too.
pat yourselves on the back for sticking with us.
Sticking with us. So this episode is about Daniel Oliver Jones, a Black serial killer responsible for the deaths of 4 women, all of whom were murdered in Kansas City, Missouri. And this story was suggested to us by our fruity Milton K.
Hey, thank you, Milton. We appreciate you all providing us with suggestions. And Milton, this is for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So before we get into the episode, how you doing?
I'm doing much better. I'm over the COVID.
Great.
Things are going pretty good. Keeping busy at work.
Yeah.
My grandson, I think I was telling you about this when we were in the UK. He's taking these Ninja Warrior classes.
Yeah, you told me about that, which is so fucking awesome.
He loves it. He's got ADHD, so he's got so much energy.
Yeah.
And my daughter said that he's in his element.
Yeah.
When he's taking these classes.
Does he get tired? Does it exhaust
No.
him? No. Wow. That is so
Kid's
beautiful.
never tired.
I love that. I love that.
And he went to a class today and he just seems so happy, and it makes my heart glad.
Oh my God. I love that so much.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, update. So my kids have been taken out of school and we're doing a virtual school. And I work remotely and podcast and stuff. So everybody's home all the time. But here's the thing. It's so awesome.
Is it?
We no longer have the hustle and bustle of the mornings. We just have a chill breakfast morning together. We no longer have just got home from school. Now it's time to get ready for my activities.
Yeah.
None of that. We're just enjoying all being like in the house together.
Wow.
And it has been so lovely.
Nice.
There's Like, old Whitey's less grumpy because he doesn't have to drive in the crazy Atlanta traffic.
Yeah.
So that's good. So anyway, cut to hanging out with my kids after they were done with their classes, and I took a break from work and was roller skating in the driveway, and I fell so hard on my back. My neck is killing me.
Oh no, that's not good.
I know. I don't think I didn't like break anything. I'm quite a substantial human being. So nothing's like broken. It's just like a little sore. Like, I'm too old to be falling like that. I got all overconfident because the day before we went to the roller rink, and I was like, oh man, I got this.
Yeah.
But my driveway is like a hill and there's gravel. And anyway, it was.
I remember the last time I skated, I fell really hard and I messed up my wrist and my tailbone, and that was it. That was the end.
Yeah. If you go down, it's not good. It's not good.
No.
But it's so fun. And I just love the sensation of roller skating.
Have you seen the rollerblading dancers? I think I sent you a TikTok video.
I think I recall that.
They're fucking amazing.
Yes, and that was something really cool to see because at the roller rink, it was Saturday night. The DJ was fucking fire, and there are a lot of teenage kids who hang out at the skating rink, which when boys get on their roller skates, they're zooming through people. They don't care who's around, but they're so talented.
Yeah.
They're dancing and doing all these really cool tricks, and they probably got like thousands of Instagram followers, each one of them. But they're like filming each other with their phones and doing routines. And it's just like electrifying.
Very cool.
Yeah. And they could be out doing something much worse, Yeah,
they could be getting into trouble and they're skating.
They're
so
skating
that's
and
wonderful.
they're having fun. Yeah. So my recommendation, get some skates, everybody. Now let's get into some listener letters.
All right.
What's in that bag, Beth?
Well, we got a message from Captain Planet.
Captain Planet.
Yeah.
He's a hero. Gonna take pollution down to zero.
Captain Planet. And it was about our recent episode that we dropped about The Stroll, the documentary, The Stroll.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain Planet said, I have to say this episode took me back to my teens, maybe 15. 1980s, I would go clubbing until the dawn. And if I ended up on the West Side, the trans women were just so loving, funny, and heartbreaking all at the same time. We'd have breakfast together in a diner telling stories really loudly. The reality of gay unity was a fantasy. Until the AIDS era, women, trans, POC, and variety that was not white, cis-passing male was not included in the rainbow. It was actually dangerous to be at a party with these log cabin Republicans.
Oh.
Captain Planet said, so gay. I know people who were drugged and assaulted in dungeon parties. Still, to this day, there's a political divide. Can't wait to watch this documentary. I have a place in my heart for those women in the diner. I felt protected, loved, and mothered. We were all connected in our femininity. The love flowed.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that.
Really beautiful message. So thank you, Captain Planet.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am going to give Captain Planet a hip hop air horn. Okay.
And if you have any questions or comments, please send them to fruitloopspod@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 602-935-6294. And we may feature it on a future episode. But if you don't want us to, just let us know and we won't.
It's that simple.
Yep.
Let's take a quick break and get into the story when we come back.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
On the morning of August 1st, 1966, shots ring out from the observation deck of the clock tower on the University of Texas campus. It marks the infamous beginning of the modern era of mass shootings in America.
You're listening to Stop the Killing podcast. Join us as we take you behind the crime scene tape to explain global mass shootings and mass attacks. I'm Sarah Ferris, but more importantly, this is Catherine Schweit, the former head of the FBI's active shooter program.
I spent 5 years as the FBI's top executive looking for answers to the mass shooting crisis. I've been at the shooting scenes, I've traced heroic acts of bravery, and I've sat silently and listened to the heart-wrenching stories from survivors.
Amongst this horror, there is hope. We all hold the key to stop the killing. You just need to know how to unlock the door. Download Stop the Killing and be part of the solution. Search Stop the Killing on Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects.
All right, we're back. Remind us, Beth, who is our subject?
Our subject today is the Kansas City, Missouri serial killer Daniel Oliver Jones, and he murdered 4 women between 1998 and 2001.
All right, so we are going to move on to the Love and Light section of our show, where we say rest in power to the victims whose lives were cut too short, and love and light to their loved ones and communities left in the wake of these horrific crimes. The victims are Janai Douglas, 19, Kaliqua Gilliam, 21, Roxanne Coley, 21, and Candrea White, 18. So now we're going to get into the setting. Take us there, Beth.
Well, the setting is Kansas City, Missouri, located on the west side of Missouri on the border of Kansas, where the Kansas and Missouri rivers meet. There is also a Kansas City, Kansas, referred to as KCK, which is located northeast of Kansas City, Missouri, but Kansas City, Missouri is much larger.
Wow, didn't know that. Prior to European invasion going back over 13,000 years, thousands of distinct people called the confluence of the Kansas and Missouri rivers home. These included the Hopewell, Mississippi, Kansas, Osage, Otos, and Missouri tribes. The tribes relied heavily on buffalo as part of their survival.
Which white people killed out.
Yeah, they took away their food supply. Really horrific shit.
Yeah. In 1825, the federal government of the United States forced the Kansas and Osage tribes onto reservations in central Kansas. Today, the influence of these tribes is still evident in place names and cultural sites around Kansas City.
The origins of Kansas City date back to the early 1800s, when French fur traders built cabins along the Missouri River. After the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, Lewis and Clark, doo-doo heads, visited the confluence of the Kansas and Missouri rivers, noting it was a good place to build a fort. Well,
this is a good place to take over.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah. This is ours now.
My daughter's learning about Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea right now.
Right.
And I was like, do you know what those men did to that little girl?
Wow.
Yeah, it's not cool. So
not cool. Yeah. The town of Kansas was formed in 1838 and incorporated in 1850. By that time, the towns of Kansas, Westport, and nearby Independence had become critical points in the westward expansion of the United States. 3 major trails, the Santa Fe Trail, the California Trail, and the Oregon Trail, all passed through Jackson County.
Do you remember the Oregon Trail video game?
Yes, I do.
Tight. So the era leading up to the Civil War was a tense and bloody time in Kansas City, as Missouri was a slave state and Kansas was a free state. The Battle of Westport, one of the bloodiest battles west of the Mississippi, took place in what today is Luce Park and Forest Hill Cemetery.
With the Union prevailing, the city remained divided. By 1870, a downtown street grid had been established. Northerners preferred to live on the west side of Main Street on streets dubbed Pennsylvania, Broadway, and Washington, and Southerners on the east side on streets such as Oak, Walnut, and Locust.
kind of telling
Yeah,
what the names were given.
right.
Side-eye. Kansas City also has a long history of racial segregation, particularly evident in the early 20th century. The city was divided along racial lines, with Black communities and economically disenfranchised communities primarily located east of Troost Avenue. West of Troost Avenue is the part going towards the state of Kansas. And the 4 women who this episode is about, their lives were taken in areas both east and west of Troost Avenue.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In April 1968, Kansas City became one of 37 cities in the United States to be subject to rioting after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., a hero for civil rights and equity. The city was stunned and in shock after King's murder, and a Black church planned for a memorial march in his honor.
Now, this happened all over the United States, but particularly in Kansas City, following a meeting with students, police, and community leaders on Friday, April 5th, high school students held an impromptu march. It was estimated there were 2,000 people who participated in this peaceful march. Black community leaders planned a larger march on that Sunday, April 7th, and there were somewhere between 5,000 to 15,000 people who attended this march.
After they were pressured by civil rights organizations, on Monday, April 8th, the police department and city leaders announced that they intended to close schools the following day out of respect. But they couldn't reach the school board to confirm, so the schools remained open.
So because the announcement was made that they intended to close, but the schools remained open, on April 9th, the students just walked out of their classrooms in protest, and they headed downtown. Eventually, school administrators decided to close the schools in order to avoid property damage.
The protest rapidly turned from a student protest into a civil rights march. The mayor joined the march and they ended up at City Hall. All sounds pretty good so far.
Okay.
But there, they were met with police and state highway patrol. There were some remarks from City Hall, and then the protesters were asked to return to the east side of town.
However, some of the crowd didn't hear that request, and the police ended up using tear gas to get them to disperse. The protest then magically escalated. And
Magically.
Why? Despite the mayor declaring a state of emergency and implementing a citywide curfew, riots began that evening. There were reports of stonings, lootings, fires, 20 injuries, and 1 death at the hands of the KCPD.
The unrest continued the next day on April 10th. By the end of that night, there were 45 counts of arson, 5 additional civilian deaths, 11 civilian injuries, and 4 injured officers. Fires destroyed many homes and local businesses on the east side of town.
In the 1960s and 70s, the time of great struggle, conflict, and violence in the nation of the United States, violent crime increased in Kansas City. Violent crime peaked in the 1990s during the war on drugs.
Doing drugs.
In the late...
Sorry, couldn't resist.
I know. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Kansas City still had high rates of violent crime, including assaults and robberies and a notable number of homicides.
At the time that the murders that we're going to talk about occurred, Kansas City's homicide rate was much higher than the national average, about 35 per 100K compared to 9.5 per 100K nationally. That's nuts.
That's a lot. Yeah.
I had no idea there were so many homicides in Kansas City.
I didn't either, and it gets worse. So most of the violent crime tends to occur east of Troost Avenue, but that could be because of under-resourced and over-policing. But almost 70% of all homicides in Kansas City, Missouri come from 2 of the 6 patrol areas. Again, they're over-policed. East and Metro zones. Black males made up more than 60% of homicide victims in 2020.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Kansas City has been aware of its shameful crime and homicide statistics for generations. Police years ago implemented a strategy called focused deterrence, where police would try to identify those at risk of being crime victims or those at risk of committing crimes.
Reminds me of that Tom Cruise movie.
That movie, yeah.
The Minority Report.
Yeah, exactly. What do they call them? Future crimes?
Yes.
I don't remember.
Future,
Yeah.
which is, you could go to jail for thinking about murdering somebody.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know how that
Works.
worked. But
yeah.
in 2013, they launched a new program called the Kansas City No Violence Alliance that brought together police, prosecutors, federal agencies, which collaborated with community partners and offered resources to deter individuals from crime.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. If you say so.
Yeah.
That was effective for a while, but then homicide numbers began to increase again, seeing the highest rates during 2020, which was 2020 was bad for everybody.
Bad for everybody, yeah.
Yeah. The mayor and the chief of police seem to recognize that strong communities and the collaboration of everyone is necessary. And we're not sure if that's been done.
To date, yeah.
Yeah, today. So Kansas City Fruities, please let us know if you know anything about that.
Yeah. What's it like on the ground?
Yeah.
Despite progress, Kansas City remains one of the most segregated cities in the United States. The divide along Troost Avenue still exists, with stark differences in income, education, and life expectancy between the east and west sides. So that's the setting. Let's get into the early life of Daniel Oliver Jones. Hit it, Beth.
Daniel Oliver Jones was born on September 26, 1969. He grew up in the Kansas City, Missouri area near Raytown, east of Troost Avenue.
In high school, Daniel was frequently in trouble for disruptive behavior, excessive tardiness, and roaming the halls without passes. And that's
pretty much all we know.
On his early life.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, there was a lot of speculation about his childhood, but I didn't see it in enough places to
Anything
feel
solid.
confident. That we should go with it. So now let's get into the timeline. What do you got for us, Beth?
May 20th, 1987 was the last day of classes before summer vacation at Raytown South High School, where Jones was a senior. At about 10:30 a.m., a female teacher entered a classroom to prepare for a class. She rearranged the desks, and because the room didn't have any windows, she opened some double doors which led into an auditorium.
As she opened the doors, a man reached in and grabbed her wrist, yanked her into the school auditorium, shoved her onto the floor, and started choking her.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. As she struggled, she looked at his face and saw that the attacker was a student. She didn't know him very well, though. The teenager raped her and then ran away when the 10:47 a.m. bell rang.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Students who were switching classes later told police that they saw the teacher standing in the hallway in a ripped blue dress, screaming hysterically that she'd been raped. At about the same time, other witnesses told police they saw Jones running out of the auditorium.
The victim gave a description of the man who raped her to the police officers. One of the officers gave her a school yearbook to determine if she could identify anyone. From this book, she identified Jones. Jones was arrested, placed in a lineup, and the victim identified Jones from a videotape of that lineup.
This December, Christmas gets creepy with the Empty Coffin Podcast. This is host Greg Hansberry, and we are unwrapping the dark side of the holidays. This month, we revisit the haunting tragedy of a rock legend's final performance.
The band was on. They had just started their opening song. The killer walks across the stage, gun drawn.
We revive the forgotten tradition of telling ghost stories for Christmas.
There's this miserable, sour old man who spends all the time on his own in the graveyard, and the goblins take him.
And we sink our teeth into Nosferatu lore.
This story cropped up that the actor who played Nosferatu was so convincing that he was an actual vampire.
The Empty Coffin Podcast is part of the Evergreen Network. Subscribe on your favorite app and have yourself a scary little Christmas.
Hey, podcast listeners, I'm Paul Brandis introducing my podcast, Countdown to Dallas. It's a fascinating, in-depth look at the seemingly unconnected events that led to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. It's based on my book of the same title. In that book and in this podcast, I go all the way back to 1939, when Lee Harvey Oswald was born into a troubled and dysfunctional family. I'll follow his transient and often violent teenage years and young adulthood, painting a fuller picture of the man who would later become Kennedy's killer. I also take a look at events unfolding in that era like Cuba and Vietnam, and I'll unpack the conspiracy theories too, not one of which has ever been conclusively proven. Subscribe to Countdown to Dallas at evergreenpodcasts.com or your favorite listening app, October 31st.
According to court records, when police questioned Jones 2 days later, he told them he'd been hanging out with 4 other guys in the locker room at the time of the rape. When they told him they planned to question those boys, he said that actually he'd been sitting outside on a grassy hill reading a textbook.
What?
Minding his own beeswax.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. When police reminded him that students had already turned in their textbooks the day before the rape, he said he had been outside sleeping. Oh, no. I wasn't reading.
Right. I was sleeping.
And then he changed his story again, claiming that he had been sleeping on the steps leading from the stage to the auditorium when he'd been awakened by a scream, and immediately ran from the auditorium because he was afraid he would get into trouble because he was not supposed to be in the auditorium at that time.
So there was a trial, and Jones testified at his trial, admitting that he had told the police 5 or 6 different versions of what he had been doing just prior to and during the time the rape took place. And forensics experts found a hair on the teacher and testified that it matched a hair from Jones.
Now, today we know that that is junk science, but in the 80s...
I don't think they said it was an exact match, or maybe they did, but... I mean, you can look at 2 hairs and say they're similar.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's strong enough evidence to convict. But in this case, there is witnesses, there is his changing story, there is the witness who identified him in a lineup, and the hair, right? So all those things, I don't have any criticisms of that. It's just the hair is not the linchpin in any case in 2024. It shouldn't be anyway.
Gotcha.
So in March 1988, a jury convicted Jones of felony forcible rape, and a judge sentenced him to 10 years in prison. In 1989, he attempted to appeal his sentence by claiming that prosecutors should have been prohibited from using his inappropriate school behavior as evidence, but the appeal was rejected.
While in prison, he did not receive any psychological treatment, and rehabilitation during his incarceration is questionable. In 1996, Jones was released on parole after serving 8 years and registered as a level 3 sex offender.
2 years later, on December 2nd, 1998, 19-year-old Janai Douglas was stabbed to death in the bedroom of her apartment. Her body was discovered by a roommate around 7:30 p.m.
The Jones family had lived across the street from the Douglas family for years. The families went to the same church. As a kid, Daniel Jones had mowed the Douglases' lawn. Janai, who was almost 10 years younger than Jones, often played with his little sister, Melissa. The girls were close friends by the time they started attending Raytown South High School.
After Janai's murder, her mother, Kim Douglas, had seen Jones every now and then when he'd come back to visit his parents or help them with home repairs. Whenever Douglas saw Jones outside doing yard work, he smiled and he waved and sometimes stopped to chat. What a sick fuck.
Yeah.
She said, quote, "It was always, 'Hi, how are you doing?' Real friendly," unquote.
These guys.
Yeah.
The ones that come back to the victims' families and are nice to them, or the one that attended the barbecue.
Yeah. Disgusting.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
On March 10th, 1999, the body of Kaliqua Gilliam, 21, was found by her cousin, lying dead in her duplex. Kaliqua had been stabbed a total of 36 times.
Kaliqua was scheduled to testify against 2 men in an armed robbery case in which she had allegedly been the getaway driver. Police may have believed that she was targeted because she was a witness.
A few months later, on August 16th, Roxanne Colley, 21, was murdered in her apartment. Roxanne had some family in Kansas City including an aunt and uncle who had raised her after her own mother died at an early age. She was working as a legal secretary for the Internal Revenue Service and had plans to attend Rockhurst University and eventually law school.
When no one had heard from Roxanne for 3 days, a friend went to her home to check on her. The friend walked around outside the house and saw that someone had broken out a back window.
Roxanne's body was inside. She'd been raped and beaten, and her throat had been slashed. During the autopsy, semen was recovered from Roxanne's body. The evidence was swabbed and turned over to investigators. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. I hear a DNA coming on. So the Kansas City Crime Lab had a backlog of DNA waiting to be tested and only enough funds to pay 2 DNA experts.
Wow.
Yeah. It took nearly a year and a half for experts at the lab to create a DNA profile from the evidence collected from the body of Roxanne Coley.
Before the perpetrator could be identified, on March 6, 2001, Kendria White, 18, was murdered. Kendria was a single mother of 2 children and a student at Penn Valley Community College.
According to her mother, Stephanie, Kendria was focused and she knew what she wanted. The young woman had recently moved with her 2 children to the Linden Hill apartment complex, and her plan was to transfer to the University of Missouri, Kansas City after 2 years to finish her degree.
That's remarkable. She's 18 years old. She's a single mother, and she had all these plans, and she seemed like really driven.
Driven to not be a statistic. I know women like Kendria, and I just admire
very much
the tenacity and the relentlessness. I'm doing this.
Yep. Kendria and her mother were very close, and they often spoke on the phone. Kendria told her mother that Jones was stalking her. Stephanie thought that stalking was just something that white folks do and paid it no mind.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. The article that I read, she had talked about how she, saw stories about stalking on TV, and it was always white people.
Right.
So you don't hear stories of your own people.
Right.
You don't know.
You don't know that it's a thing, right? Imagine people's surprise when we say serial killers of color.
Yeah.
What? Yes.
And that's why it's important to tell all these stories.
I could not agree more. Yeah, I did not pick up on that fact that she reported that he was stalking her and her.
Yeah. And I also want to mention that in the Wikipedia article, because I always look at Wikipedia.
Yeah, it's the first
like
spot.
A starting point.
Yeah.
They said that he dated some of these women. I don't think he dated any of these women.
No.
I think that's something that he claimed later. Yeah. I wish it was not in the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, maybe we should do something about that.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
Who do we write to?
Who's in charge here?
So back to the story. Okay. Stephanie thought that stalking was just something that white folks do.
And paid it no mind. So she suggested that Kendria block Jones's phone number. Kendria said that she did, but he kept calling her from different numbers. And one night, he just showed up at her house in the middle of the night, and she had to tell him to leave. That's really scary.
Terrifying.
And her kids are there.
Her kids, yeah. Then on the afternoon of March 6, 2001, Kendria's neighbor noticed that Kendria's door was halfway open and that her 3-year-old daughter, Raquel, was standing in the hallway of the apartment just inside the front door. The neighbor asked Raquel where her mother was, and Raquel told her that her mother was dead.
The neighbor called the police. Inside the apartment, the investigators found Kendria's body lying in a pool of blood, clad only in a bloody-stained white t-shirt and socks. Kendria had been stabbed 14 times and beaten so badly that she was nearly unrecognizable.
Evidence suggested that her killer had chased her from room to room and cut her repeatedly before she fell and bled to death. Her throat had also been cut, and her children had witnessed her murder.
Speaking to people who had seen her that day, police determined that Kendria had been murdered sometime between 12:30 p.m. and 4:17 p.m. During their investigation, the police discovered a bloody handprint on the wall of Kendria's living room.
In the middle of the fucking day.
In the middle of the day with her children home.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So let's get into the investigation and the arrest. What, Beth?
2 days after her murder, police learned that the bloody handprint matched a fingerprint card that Daniel Oliver Jones had signed in 1998. That day, police arrested Jones at his home.
So it must have been when he was released and registered as a level 3 sex offender.
Yeah.
Jones told lead detective Doug Niemeyer that he had never even heard of Candrea White. Niemeyer asked Jones if he'd ever been inside an apartment in the Linden Hill complex. Never in my life, Jones replied. He told police that they nabbed the wrong guy.
Jones then proceeded to tell police exactly what he had done on the day of his arrest, from the time he got out of bed in the morning until he was taken into police custody. But when the cops asked him to recount his actions from the previous day, the day after the murder, Jones abruptly ended the questioning, saying, quote, "It's none of your business where I was at," unquote.
Wait a minute. You can't just be like, we're questioning you for a murder investigation. None your beeswax. What?
That's crazy.
So Jones was charged with the murder of Candrea White. Then in July of 2001, the DNA evidence collected from Roxanne Coley's body was matched to Jones, and he was also charged with her murder. Police also suspected him in the murders of Janai Douglas and Kaliqua Gilliam. So that's it for the investigation. And now we're going to talk about the trial. What do you got, Beth?
A little more than a year after the murder of Candrea White in August of 2002, Jones went on trial for her murder.
Although Candrea's children had witnessed her murder, her son was an infant, and her 3-year-old daughter, Raquel, gave conflicting accounts. The trial court concluded that she was incompetent based on her age and her responses to questions during a hearing. I will say I'm glad that they did not make her testify.
Yeah,
that would have
me
been
too.
More traumatic, I think.
Yeah, and the article I was reading about it, or maybe it was the court records. Yeah, I think it was court records. Anyway, she didn't understand what had happened.
Right.
She was 3, so how could she?
Right.
Hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months as a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real-life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.
Jones did not testify at his trial, but he did present the testimony of 2 alibi witnesses, his half-sister Tiffany Hill and his half-sister's cousin Antoine Johnson. Antoine Johnson testified that he saw Jones around 2 p.m. on the day of Candrea's murder for about an hour and 45 minutes.
Tiffany Hill testified that Jones was at her home from 12:15 p.m. until about 4 p.m. that day. Although she later admitted that she was not home the entire time and that she did not know what James was doing while she was in her bedroom.
So, worthless.
Right.
The key witness, though, was Kathleen Henches, a fingerprint identification expert with the Kansas City Regional Crime Lab, who testified that the bloody handprint found on the wall of Candrea's apartment belonged to Jones, saying, quote, "No one else could possibly have left that print," unquote. Got him.
Got him. Yeah, that's convincing for a jury for sure.
Yeah.
So in August of 2002, after less than an hour of deliberation, Jones was convicted of the murder of 18-year-old Kendria White. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Although the state had DNA evidence in Roxanne Colley's murder, Jones claimed that he and Roxanne had been in a sexual relationship, and I think this is why he claimed that.
Okay.
And the cases against him for the murders of Janai Douglas and Kaliqua Gilliam were considerably weaker. They didn't have DNA evidence in those cases, I don't think.
Okay. And on March 19th, 2004, Jones took a plea deal for the murders of Janai Douglas, Kaliqua Gilliam, and Roxanne Coley. Jones pleaded guilty in order to avoid the death penalty. His prior conviction would have been an aggravating factor, which was required in order to seek the death penalty.
In exchange for pleading guilty, Jones received 20 years on top of his life without parole sentence. So he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life. I couldn't agree more with the jury's decision in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just... Listen, we'll get into it in our takes. Let's talk about where are they now? Well, just a reminder, all of the victims, Janai Douglas, Kaliqua Gilliam, Roxanne Coley, and Kendria White, were all survived by close family and friends. Janai Douglas's mother, Kim, was actually unhappy with the outcome of the case. She said although Jones did plead guilty, she wanted him proven guilty. And there was DNA found at the crime scene of Janai's murder, but it was a mixed sample. And at that time, they did not have a way of separating the sample and testing it.
I think they do now, but I'm not 100%.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Jeez, I'm gonna have to put away my DNA Halloween costume. But
at that time, they did not.
Sure.
Yeah. But Kaliqua Gilliam's grandmother, Elizabeth Reed, she did not want to see Jones put to death, so she was satisfied with the result.
Now, Jones is currently serving his time at Crossroad Correctional Center in Cameron, Missouri. That's it for the story. What do you think of this case, Beth? What are your thoughts, OG of true crime?
Well, this is another one like last week.
Yeah.
Where we didn't get to hear much about the perpetrator's early life.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's hard to say why he did what he did.
Yeah.
He was pretty brazen in his crimes.
Right.
Raping a teacher at school during the school day.
What?
Yeah. Killing a woman. When you're a student.
I mean, just things that are brazen is the right word. Is there a stronger word? Somebody, an English person, English teacher, tell us.
Yeah, killing a woman in the middle of the day
in front of
her children.
Yeah.
So it seems like he didn't have very much control over himself. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of serial killers don't, but some of them, they at least plan things out. I don't know if he even planned any of this out.
I don't think so either. And I hate the phrase propensity for violence. I saw that on the last case that we covered in some articles. I hate it because it just implies that a human isn't capable of self-control. But I feel like a case can be made for Daniel Oliver Jones that he had a propensity for violence.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I did a lot of research on the town of Kansas City and the racist history in the police department. And I was expecting there to be police fuckery all over this case.
Right.
Up, down, left, right, diagonal, etc. When I dove into it. And, Kansas City PD is a little bit different than other police departments in that it's not controlled by the city. It's controlled by the state of Missouri.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't know that.
It has a long-ass history of racism and corruption.
Yeah, I bet.
But I was pleasantly surprised. They investigated the murders. They sent the DNA that was available out for testing and got the right guy and solved the cases. Also, Daniel Oliver, we don't know, but he just seems so angry. Like the stabbings that did occur there were so many.
Over the top. Yeah.
Over the top. Like
overkill.
Yes. He must have been extremely angry at something.
Yeah.
And maybe it was his circumstances. Maybe he was poor. I don't know. Maybe it was the frustration.
Yeah, we don't even know what he was doing for a living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe it was being Black in America in a really racist community or town. I'm not sure, but the fact that he committed such violent crime beginning at a young age is terrifying.
Yeah.
And again, no remorse. Like he kept changing his story.
Right.
Only because he didn't want to get in trouble. Not like, I care about this person. So much so that he like went to the mom and was like, oh, how are you doing? Like that is
right.
beyond
That's so gross.
Fucked up.
Very fucked up. Yeah.
And so I just feel like he hated women, and I feel like he had no regard for human beings, period. That's my thought on this guy.
I agree. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And again, rest in power to the victims, to those queens, and just healing energy to their surviving family members, friends, and community.
Yeah.
So let's get into how not to get murdered.
All right.
So if you love true crime and you don't want to die, here's a tip for you.
This segment is not intended to be victim blaming. We thought of this segment because I read somewhere that a lot of people listen to true crime because they want to know what they can do to be safer. This is not meant to blame the victims. It's just learning from other people's experiences. So what you got?
So I just have a couple of things. When I lived in Phoenix, I noticed that they offered self-defense classes, free ones, at the library. And cut to here in Georgia, I saw that they have self-defense classes that they offer at the libraries here. So look into it. If you are a supporter of your local library, sign up for the free self-defense classes that they have.
That is so cool.
And then I also wanted to shout out a creator on Instagram. Her name is Cessa Gracie. And the Gracie family is like royalty in terms of jujitsu and like mixed martial arts. So she's, from that line.
Okay.
And my kids actually take jujitsu. And the Gracie family has a program for kids that's about anti-bullying. They have videos online.
Oh, nice.
It's helped with their confidence. But this particular creator, Cessa Gracie, she posts a lot of quick, short video tips on how to handle yourself in all kinds of situations. If somebody grabs you from behind, remember these are things that happen in the story, grabs you from behind, or if somebody picks you up or drags you or pulls you by your hair, what to do with your body in order to buy yourself some time and get away.
Nice.
So again, that's Cessa Gracie on Instagram for just quick videos to give you an idea of what you can do to keep yourself safe, and also check your library for self-defense classes for free.
Very cool. Thank you.
You bet. All right. What's next? Oh, look. Shout out time.
Shout out time.
Where we shout out any content by or about people of color, anybody who is marginalized, or any true crime goodies. I have a little bit of both, I guess. The Innocence Files, and I may have shouted it out in the past, but I binged the whole series beginning to end. And it's a docuseries on Netflix about the inception and ongoing work of the Innocence Project. And it includes their works in getting wrongfully convicted people out of prison and ensuring that that shit doesn't keep happening. And the point that I got was that accuracy is more important for justice than retribution is.
Yeah.
So check that out.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I wanted to shout out Agatha All Along on Disney Plus. Have you watched it yet?
I haven't, but everybody keeps saying it's a good one.
It's really fun. It's a spin-off from the series WandaVision.
Uh-huh.
With Agatha Harkness. She's a witch.
Yes.
And the cast is actually pretty diverse.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's a fun one. And then another one for fun, Unsolved Mysteries Volume 5 just dropped the other day.
What?
Yeah.
That is still cooking. I love that.
Still
Okay.
cooking. Yeah.
Where can you watch Unsolved Mysteries? Volume
That's
5?
on Netflix.
Okay, got it. Those shout-outs, just to recap, are The Innocence Files, a docuseries on Netflix, Agatha All Along on Disney Plus, and Unsolved Mysteries Volume 5, also on Netflix.
Right on.
All right, so Beth, where can the people find us?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media. The footnotes for each episode can be found on our website. Plus, check it out for the different ways that you can support the show. Also, join us on Patreon, where we have literally hundreds of hours of bonus content. You can also support us by supporting our sponsors or by giving us a 5-star review.
5 stars only, please.
Also, don't forget to subscribe.
That's right. Now, listen close. This is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.
Another
Wrong
one.
button. Sorry.
Okay.
Wow. What is it, Beth? Talk to me, Beth. What do you got, Beth? What's going on over there? Huh? Captain Planet.
Yeah.
He's a hero. Gonna take pollution down to 0. Lewis and Clark. Doo-doo heads.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. If you say so.
Yeah. Niemir.
I think it's Niemeyer.
Niemeyer. I like Niemeyer better, but Niemeyer. Yeah, maybe we should do something about that.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
Who do we write to?
Who's in charge here?
Henges. I don't know.
Henges. Yeah. I'm good. Good in the neighborhood. It's Monday.
Yeah, fucking Monday.
Yeah. Monday. You didn't have to go to work today, did you?
Oh yeah, of course.
Because the Rona? But you got Rona.
No. I know. It's been over a week.
Oh, dang it. That sucks.
So,
you don't have
to work
they didn't take away like your telecommute days because you were out.
Oh no.
Okay.
No. I actually did not technically have to come in, but I came in anyway. Because that's how I do.
Oh, right. Yeah. Most people that say, I love going in the office, I believe they're lying. But you are telling the truth. I haven't left my house a day, so I'm totally fine with it. And that's it.
All right.
Okay, all done. Whew. All right, get some sleep, would
Thank
you?
Yeah. I will. You too.
Samesies. But now I want to watch Agatha All Along. It's 10 o'clock here. I could squeeze it in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Night.
Bye.
Bye.
I want to take a moment to tell you about my podcast, Carol Costello Presents Blind Rage. In 1984, a woman named Phyllis Cottle was abducted in broad daylight, tortured, and left to die in a burning car in Akron, Ohio. At the time, I was a rookie reporter covering this horrific story. Since then, I've reported every kind of crime imaginable. I've been able to leave most of them at work, but not this one, the one that buried itself under my skin and stayed put. Phyllis Cottle was a badass woman, and I want to tell you her story. A production of Evergreen Podcasts and signature title of the Killer Podcast Network, you can find Carol Costello Presents Blind Rage wherever you get your podcasts. Discover more great true crime and paranormal programming at killerpodcast.com.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Sean McCabe.
And I'm Carrie McCabe.
We are, well, married, obviously, but we're also obsessed with the darker side of things.
True crime stories, alien abductions, poltergeists. If it leaves you scratching your head and keeping those lights on at night, we want to hear about it.
That's why we host the podcast, Ain't It Scary, with Sean and Carrie.
Every week, we bring our listeners a true story guaranteed to send chills down your spine. From history's most brutal serial killers to the mystery of spontaneous human combustion.
Yep, lots of these stories leave unanswered questions behind, and you'll get to poke through the rubble of the evidence with a hardened skeptic and...
someone whose mind is more open to fun.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
You can find Ain't It Scary with Sean and Carrie wherever you get your podcasts. And on social media at Ain't It Scary. Come play with us.